Okay, so admittedly, this is the one chassis, all Computex I've been looking forward to getting to play with. Yes, I have one, but what I have is an early engineering sample that is a little different than what the final sample looks like. So we showed you the GPU mount mechanism in our short, but this is the EX5 lineup, EX5 and EX6. And you guys had a lot of comments. You guys had, and mostly positive. I mean, just people were liking the fact that it looked different. There was a lot of mention of it looked like another company's chassis, but it's very different. And there's a lot more to it than I actually thought, because there's so much more design philosophy that's put into this than, hey, let's just make compartments.
Computex 2026 coverage is proudly sponsored by Phanteks, with support from Asus ROG, NZXT, Haven, and Cooler Master helping us bring you wall-to-wall coverage direct from Taipei.
One of the biggest things that you guys said was, well, what if I don't want an AIO in mind? So let's go and start over here. This is just the standard EX5. And as you can see, it does not have an AIO pre-installed. So it's got the same glass cover on the top. I don't know if it's screwed down right now. There we go. Same glass window right here. It's got the same intake fan on the back, blowing on the back of the motherboard. And yes, we'll talk about that in a sec, because there's more design in there and testing that they've done that I had questions about, and it makes perfect sense, and I can't wait to flow test it with the smoke and such. So you can see we have this cover right here, which is screwed down, but this is actually covering an opening that you can see right here, where you would be able to run your own AIO. Now, obviously, this is the EX6, which is where you get that functionality, but you obviously need a way to be able to get your tubes right over into the CPU compartment. So if we move over here to the EX6, you can see we've got this hole right here. So literally you would have the tubing come here and go into the chamber for the CPU. Now, when I first saw that, I thought, oh man, was that a Band-Aid? Was that kind of a workaround? But the more I think about it, and the fact that they have some on display, I actually kind of like the way the tubing looks, right? This is such a departure from the normal chassis. It was exciting to see what it looks like if you just had some tubes sticking out. And I love that it turns into more like, it looks like an industrial kind of a product as well. Very futuristic looking. But on the surface, the EX5 and the EX6 look identical. They're not. They're totally different design philosophies. They do not share tooling at all. They are completely different systems. The EX6 is actually slightly larger overall. In fact, it accommodates more high-end motherboards and high-end GPUs. And what we mean by that is if you look over here on the EX5, this would be more designed for like standard ATX motherboards, maybe motherboards that are not using the top slot for an M.2, but it moves the GPU up to the top slot. That alignment matters, especially if we're talking about this GPU chamber that the GPU is supposed to live in. So if everything was shifted down one slot, you would never be able to get the GPU centered in here, and not just for cooling purposes, having good cushion between the mesh on both sides. It would be aesthetically unpleasing to have this window in there, and then your GPU is off center. It's too low, it's too high. It would be too high in this instance. So the EX6 is slightly larger. It's got even more depth for the GPU chamber, because this would be for like your 80 tier, 90 tier GPUs. So it's going to have 4-slot capability, but it's down 1 slot from the EX5 because of accounting for that top M.2 SSD taking up that top slot. So everything kind of moves down 1. So the EX6 is pretty unique because of the fact that they had to completely redesign it to be able to accommodate both like mainstream GPU and components and then high-end enthusiast components. And that's not cheap, because we're talking about different tooling for each one of these chassis. Now, they had made some changes from the version that we have. We have an EX5 Plus back at the studio, which is basically this guy right here, which includes the AIO that you guys saw. It is pre-installed. So it kind of answers that question like, well, what if I wanted to build in this, but I want to kind of supply my own stuff? Well, that's again where the EX5 comes in handy, where you can use your own AIO. But you'll notice the EX6 has a rigid side panel right here. This is aluminum. It's actually pretty weighty. This is structural. It does have structural integrity to it, so that's one of the reasons why this is not mesh. But what I thought was interesting here is this gasket. So this gasket allows them to be able to properly divide the chamber for the GPU in half, where most GPUs, unless you're running an FE card, are not strictly flow-through styles. They're axial fans, which means that the air comes up through the cooler, maybe the rear fan blows through, but the front fans or older GPUs are gonna expel that air out to the side of the graphics card. And you don't want the intake picking up that hot air and just recirculating, because then you'll just have the temperature run away and it will just keep getting hotter and hotter because that air is picking up more heat every time it goes through the card. So they have this gasket, which is designed to block off the top and lower, the top half and the lower half of that chamber. So you can see that this isn't one of those like, hey, let's just make it look unique, slap some, our name on it, and then call it, a new design. They truly have looked at every single aspect of where the limitations are and how they can overcome that. We'll talk about the fan real quick. I had a lot of questions when I saw this. I went, why are we blowing air, right? Because you can see on the back that does have obviously a grill. The AIO makes sense, right? Fresh air, straight through, one side out the other, nice and cool, best temperatures you can get for your CPU. But there's other components that need to be cooled. VRMs, obviously M.2 slots need some airflow over them, whether they've got their own heatsink or motherboard heatsink or no heatsink at all. You still need some airflow through those components. The number one mistake people make, especially when they're doing like custom water loops and stuff too, is they'll remote mount radiators and then you have no airflow in the main compartment with the motherboards, and then surface devices start getting hot on the board. This fan right here actually has way more space between the back of the motherboard and then where the front of the fan blades are than it looks like. The distance from the blade to the back of the motherboard is approximately 22 millimeters. So that's a huge gap. And the reason that is we've showed this with smoke. Air does not travel in a straight line through a fan. A fan is able to move air because of centrifugal force. The blade is picking up the air, it's scooping it, and it's throwing it to the side. But because the fan is spinning, that means the air is gonna move diagonally, which makes a perfect cone as it comes out of the fan. So what they found right here is if you look, we've got a pretty big opening around this fan. The air actually, and they say, hey, smoke test this, you'll see what we're saying. The air will come out around the fan in a 360 pattern, wrap around the VRMs, and then will make its way to the front side of the motherboard, where you'll then have the heat picked up and then the air expelled. Now, the way the air expelled is a little different based on the chassis we're talking about here. So one of the things you see here with the EX6, where you provide your own AIO, is this hole right here actually becomes the exit for that. So here's a fully built out EX6 right here, where you can see the tubing coming through. They use their AIO that has a screen on it right here. But you can actually feel, I don't have my smoke machine with me, but you can actually feel the air coming out around this hole right here. So the air is doing exactly what they said it was going to do, which is making its way through the back of the motherboard, wrapping around the top, it's wrapping around the RAM, and then it's expelling itself through this hole right there. When it comes to the GPU right here, I can actually feel air moving on both sides. A system that's actually running over there, creating heat right now, you can feel the heat coming right out. So it might be an interesting test to use a thermal imaging camera for that as well. But this right here though is the top of the stack. This is the EX6 Max, and everything you see right here, minus the system, but you see the LED strips right here, you see the fans built into the AIO, you see this 10-inch screen right here is all included. And this is kind of like the full tilt, you get everything from below, obviously up to the bigger screen, the bigger AIO, the better fans. These are Phanteks X30 fans. These are 30 millimeter fans, which give you even more static pressure, even more CFM. And because of that too, you don't have to run them at incredibly high speeds. So I can't even hear this system running. I hear the AC in the room over this. But you get this 10-inch screen right here, which allows you to basically have a built-in sensor panel to be able to monitor everything happening in your system. But we just talked about the fact that the air needs somewhere to go, right? So if we come in closer right here, you'll see that there's around the screen, there's this frame that actually has perforations in it. Now, my first thought was like, okay, I was just explained that the air, if you just put mesh on the top, because they tested this. They tested what happens if we just put mesh on the top of the panel. Well, the air wants to go in the path of least resistance. It's a fluid. That's the way fluids travel. It just made its way right out the top, and the VRM temperature suffered. In fact, everything in the front side of the motherboard suffered outside the CPU, getting fresh, cold liquid from the AIO. So what they did was on the back of the screen, there's actually a hole. There's actually a hole for that air to be able to go into, and then on the outside of the frame, after it enters that hole, is where the air can come out through this perforation. So that's why I say this is not just a recycled concept from previous chassis design. This is a full ground up concept here that has made its way into market in a time when slapping your name on a fish tank is how people make cases these days. And it's so refreshing to see the way that this has been developed. Okay, but you might be looking at this going, but Jay, how much rigidity does this actually have? Well, first of all, it is really rigid. There is like no twist in this at all. It kind of looks like it should, considering all this stuff just kind of slides in. Well, the bottom chamber is like always attached, but the GPU chamber just slides in right there. But they basically said, go ahead and show this. You can pick it up by the GPU chamber. I'm holding the GPU chamber, nothing else. And that is a fully built system right there. So if you were wondering about how strong it is, there you go. So I was not willing to do that with mine. They said, go ahead and do it. There you go. I think some of you mentioned too, what this is dying for is some sort of a wall mount, like a nice spacer on the back and a wall mount, but I don't know, maybe this is the first version of this type of chassis, and I have a feeling Phanteks is gonna build upon this over time. These panels right here, I love the silver. This is actually 3mm anodized aluminum. It is absolutely, I think, gorgeous the way this looks. The only downside, and I've already said this, is the aluminum panel here means I don't get to see my expensive graphics card because the EX6 is designed for high-end hardware. Unfortunately, you can't see it, but that was a design choice for rigidity. That was a design choice to make sure that this component, when it's locked in, is providing structural integrity to the chassis. So to have this be glass with the larger frames and the heavier components, there was too much of a compromise there. So the solid metal panel was just the kind of the concession you had to make in this instance. But I tell you right now, I feel like everything else visually makes up for the fact that you can't see your graphics card. So let's go ahead and talk about pricing here real quick. The standard EX5, as you see right here, comes in at $109, which is a lot cheaper than I expected it to be. I'll be honest, when I heard custom tooling for both EX5, EX6, I'm like, oh crap, they don't share machines between the two, that's gonna drive the price up. So $109 for the standard EX5 was already surprising to hear. And I think the phrase we hear a lot is, in this economy? Yes, in this economy, they're able to manage that. So if we talk about the EX5 Plus right here that has the AIO already in it, this is a $159 model. So yeah, $50 for the AIO with the RGB fans and the RGB pump top and everything. So now you're talking about the fact that this is already competing with other chassis that, as they say, we still have to independently test, are outperforming competitors in the same price point with a completely non-conventional design is really where the exciting story is. If we talk about the EX6, this is also $159, but as you can see, it doesn't come with the AIO, so it's a provide your own AIO type of product. Now going from the EX6 at that $159 price point up to the EX5 Max has the smaller screen here, as you can see. This is a $229 product. So yeah, the screen itself is more expensive than the AIO because guess what? It uses components that are being gobbled up by the AI monster right now. So that's why that's such a big price jump to that one with the screen. Obviously, if we talk about the EX6 Max, it kind of suffers from a little bit of the same situation where anything that has ASICs is expensive right now because of the RAM issues. But this is a $329 product. Let's talk about what you get for that 329 bucks. You get the AIO, you get the X30 fans, which are giving you more flow, more pressure at less noise. It's got a different RGB type of profile, which I think is really tasteful. It's just edge lighting. You get the 10-inch screen, and then obviously you get the full aluminum chassis, covers and such here, which I think looks so tasteful. But you guys are asking me questions like, well, how is the performance? How's the thermals? I didn't think I was gonna get to show it here. They have a setup running right now where we can see the thermals live. So let's go take a look. Okay, so here's an EX6 Max that's fully functional right now. It's got a 5070 Ti in it. I'm not sure what CPU is in here right now. Oh, it's a 9800 X3D. So this is sitting right now with Shadow of the Tomb Raider going. Yeah, it's an older title, but still, it's load nonetheless. What you may not know is that when they're sitting here in the menu like this is rendering the menu. It's using the GPU, it is under full load. There is a significant amount of warmth coming up through this right here, because of the fact that this is expelling the heat exactly as it's supposed to, because the centrifugal fans that are in here for axial are also promoting that air to want to move up. So it's fully functional in the fact that we can feel the heat coming out right now. GPU is idling at about 65, 66C right now. We'll go ahead and make this run. I was not expecting to be able to show you guys some live performance, but as you can see right here, the CPU is idling. It's roughly idle. I mean, this is a benchmark track, so it's really GPU bound. But the CPU is sitting in the 50s right now. GPU is at 65. And it's really not going to go any hotter than that during the test, because the test is actually just as hard to run as the menu is. That's one of the reasons why we use Shadow of the Tomb Raider back in the day when we were doing a lot of our early DX12 testing, because of the fact that it's a good rasterization test. But look at that, 65, it's actually coming down because the fans are probably ramping up. 64, 65, 66, 65. These are not the kind of numbers I expected to see in this. I'm gonna be honest, this is better than I expected. On the back side of the AIO right now, you can, if you move your hand in the middle, feel a little bit of that warmth that's getting picked up right here because that fan does overlap into the GPU chamber. I don't think it's a bad thing though, because it's only affecting a very small portion of the radiator. It's not the radiator being fed by all that GPU heat, which a lot of standard chassis will do. So we're still getting very fresh air cooling across the board, except for, and our thermal camera will show this when we do our testing, like one spot might be a little warmer than the rest, but it's not enough, obviously, to make the CPU care at all. Now, obviously, this is not a CPU-bound test, but guess what? If we were running a CPU-bound test, the GPU is not under load and it won't be dumping that heat into the side right there, so it's not going to affect the CPU in a negative way. Everything on this is absolutely fully thought of, and I think there's more design philosophy that went into this than I was expecting. So that's why, so far, of all of Computex, this is what I was most excited for, and so far, I'm not disappointed in that. But when we talk about the designs, a lot of you guys had a lot of concerns, like, well, I don't want to run an AIO. I'm not comfortable with liquid, even though AIOs have been around for decades and they've really become way more reliable and way more leak resistant than they've ever been. A lot of people still don't like the concept of fluid with their system. So they have a prototype here that kind of is a middle ground between what the EX lineup, the EX5 looks like, EX6, and what they think that compromise might be that would make you interested in this sort of design philosophy while still being able to run air coolers. Okay, what this is right here is such an early prototype, it doesn't even have a name yet. Obviously, it would kind of fall under the EX lineup, I would assume, but as you can see, this is truly the middle ground of between the EX5 and an air-cooled version of it. I can't even take the glass off at such early sample, but as you can see right here, you could fit 12 centimeter or 120 millimeter air coolers on this. So you're not gonna fit like your big Noctua, NHD15s and stuff like that, but you're gonna fit pretty decent dual tower coolers that run 120 millimeter fans in this. Your power supply is relocated from the bottom as they are, as you can see right here on the EX5, to the top, because it pushes the whole motherboard down. That way the GPU basically is utilizing the lower chamber where the PSU was on the other EX5s, but it allows you now to have this be a single chamber. But you still get the benefit of having the AIO right here in the standard location of the other EX5 and EX6 with having fresh air flow through, but maybe a little bit more, it's kind of hard to see, this much overhang into the AIO, so it could potentially affect the AIO temperatures just a little bit more than, say, the EX5, because it is picking up more of the potential heat that the GPU is sending off right there. But we do still have, no, we don't have that fan, but we do have a traditional exhaust fan right here. And there are bottom intake fans. So what the EX5 doesn't have when it comes down there in the PSU chamber is any additional fans to pick up, because the power supply has its own fan and it just exhausts it out the back. They move fan positions down here now, so you can have kind of a chimney style updraft, and then it will just exhaust out the back right here. But this is super, super early. This is essentially a hand-built prototype, so there's no information beyond, hey, this is what we think the compromise would be with those that don't want just AIOs. You can run an AIO with this if you want. You can run an air cooler with this if you want. And it's a little bit traditional, but still kind of breaks the mold. So this is where you guys need to sound off down below in the comments if you would purchase something like this. Given the price points of what we already talked about, I think the price would be aggressive in a good way. And I just think we all have to be happy about things looking different, because we all are just used to the same fish tank style cases. And it's extremely refreshing to see Phanteks really step outside the box. And right now I think it's gonna pay dividends, because if we look at the comments, if we look at the views and we look at the murmurings of all the content creators that have been showing off the EX5, there's a huge amount of interest here. A lot of the comments have been, I'm a little scared of what the thermals might look like, but I think based on what we just showed you, that it's gonna be better than we're expecting. So obviously wait for our independent reviews once we get them when they're fully ready for a review. And please comment down below how you guys feel about the current EX5 and 6 and this prototype. All right guys, thanks for watching our Computex 2026 coverage. As always, we'll see you in the next one.